Thank you. I'm going to get myself off this view. Go back to the gallery. I'd rather look at you than me. Hi, everyone. I'm Ian. I'm an alcoholic and grateful to be here again. And and I have the home group, the KEG group, and we call it the KEG group, the Knowledge and Experience group. We meet Tuesday nights. I'm coming in today fully rested from Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. In a better place than both better place physically and emotionally from where I left you on Tuesday. I was exhausted. I'm actually feeling really good today. Not that it's going to make a difference. It's going to be what God wants to be. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my topic and why. So I chose this, Can You See the Wind? And it's important to me, and I'm going to preface it by, for the purpose of this group, I'm going to respect Alcoholics Anonymous and our primary purpose, but I'm going to ask a consideration before I start, because if you're anybody that's suffering from any alcoholic type addiction, whether it be a process or a substance, just take into consideration, does it really matter how many symptoms of that condition really exist? Because what we're going to look at as I go through is a bunch of third alternatives also. And and why is it important to know that? Well, it's important because the first step, and I spent a little time last Tuesday, and if you weren't there, you could poke your head and find the recording and listen to it, but I'm going to read something. I'm not going to use the book a lot. I don't really think I need to, but there's probably a couple things that need to come out of the book to preface where I'm coming with this. But, the beginning of page 44, the end of More About Alcoholism, into the chapter We Agnostic, it's going to ask us two distinctive questions. The first is, if you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. It's really, so we're looking at a self-diagnosed disease, and what we're looking at is, can you be honest with yourself? Have you committed and conceded to your innermost self? Not just admitted, but conceded. There's a big difference, and you can look it up, between admit and concede. But have you conceded to your innermost self that you're alcoholic? Have you seen that you have no control over the amount you take when you start at your will all the time, and when you stop, you can't stay stopped? And we talked last week about the dilemma around that's a real problem, or earlier this week. But then it says if that's the case, so if that's the case, that you might be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. So first of all, do I consider what I have an illness? And what's it look like to have a spiritual experience, and why do I need it? And what am I conquering, really? What am I trying to conquer here? Because if I'm trying to conquer the physical and mental part of this disease, I'm going to be fighting for the rest of my life. And that's why you see a lot of very, very unhappy people in 12-step recovery, because they just haven't been exposed to the truth. And the truth really lies on page 64, and it says that we may not only be physically and mentally ill, but we're spiritually sick. And until the spiritual maladies overcome, we won't straighten out physically and mentally. So there's a specific quote there that's telling me that until I straighten out the spiritual malady, I'm not going to overcome the physical and mental part of this disease. And it's really important to know this, because for a long time, I thought we treated the mental obsession. But really, the treating of the mental obsession is a byproduct of treating the spiritual malady. See, I didn't understand it, and I do today in a different light. So how do I know if I have spiritual malady? Well, that's where my title came from. Can you see the wind? See, people that I work with know this quote because I use it all the time. Like, the spiritual malady is transparent, it's invisible. Just like the wind's invisible. So how would you know that the wind is blowing? Right? And all the wind is movement of air. So I can look outside right here behind me and look at all this sky and stuff, and how would I know if it's windy out there? I can't see the wind, but what I can see is the manifestations of the wind. So I look down and I see the palm trees are blowing pretty good right now. They're bending over. So that's indicating to me that it's fairly windy outside. And so if I want to understand about the spiritual malady and why it's important, the first things I have to understand is what it does, okay? The spiritual malady, the unmanageability of my life, the spiritual sickness is described, the first half of the first step, there's a dash. It tells us we have admitted we were powerless over something. Whatever your first step problem is, you've admitted, and ultimately the book tells me on page 30 that the real first step's the concession. But then there's a dash, and start talking about unmanageable lives. And, so why is that important? Well, what would make me start doing something again after I've completely stopped doing it, knowing all the consequences? See, and I'm going to ask right now if everyone could just indulge me in a set-aside prayer, because it's really important. And I'll ask God to please enable us to set aside everything we think we know for an open mind and a new experience. And let us hear our own truth about whatever he wants us to hear. Amen. And the reason I like to say that is because it's important for me to always remain teachable. And I might say some stuff that's different than you've experienced or your sponsor's taken you through. And it doesn't mean your sponsor's wrong because I'm on here speaking. And it doesn't mean I'm wrong because your sponsor said it different. It's just a different experience, and it's okay. It's okay, because my truth's my truth until it isn't. And so, there's a condition, an internal condition that would be conducive to set up the mental obsession to return, the insanity, where I can't differentiate the true from the false. And that basically would fire off. So it's like layers, right? It actually goes in reverse. It starts with the spiritual illness, the unmanageability, and the next layer is insanity. And when the insanity returns, I've lost the ability, I'm beyond human aid, assuming, I've lost the ability to control and defend the defense necessary to stop the final layer, starting whatever the process or substance is. And the reason I started off with saying that, does it really matter how many different symptoms of the condition I have, is occasionally I hear people, and if you do this, it's okay. It's okay, it's your own truth. But occasionally I'll hear people identify themselves and they'll say they're an addict, they're an alcoholic, they're a chaos creator, they're a sex addict, they're an overshopper, overspender. They are addicted to everything. But the truth is there's probably one primary addiction that they're truly powerless over, and everything else is just a third alternative that's creeped up into their life that they found themselves unable to stop doing. Because if we don't treat the spiritual malady with conscious contact with God, we're going to treat it with something else until that doesn't work, and we're going to seek another alternative and another alternative until ultimately I'm going to go back to what fixes it. And how much pain, and the truth really lies between how much pain can I really stand in before I just can't do it anymore. when I run out of every other possible alternative. And that's when I'm going to stand between God and starting. And if I don't have a conscious contact at that point with God, I'm going to start again. It's just a fact. My truth is not that I won't do it, it's that I will do it. My truth is not that I can't do it. I know I can't. I knew I couldn't for a long time, but I did, against my will. So, is the wind blowing in your life? Well, let me ask you a couple of questions, and then we're going to look at some stuff that the book identifies as bedevilment, some other parts of the book that looks like unmanageability. And then we're going to look at a brief direction for the treating of it. So I jotted a few things down, right? Is there something wrong in your life that you will not face and make it right? See, the book talks about these bedevilments on page 52, but there's a lot of bedevilments. They're just identifying a small bit. There's a ton of bedevilments in my life that could crop up at any time. So here's where the different symptoms that come in, right? Is there a habit or an indulgence currently that I will not give up, right? Is there a person I won't forgive? Is there a wrong relationship in my life that I won't walk away from? Is there restitution I won't make? Is there something God has already told me to do that I think I can do it better? These are all some really practical stuff that goes on in my life, right? So I ask myself these questions, and I ask other people. Someone comes up to me, I get a call. I think Danielle's on, she can vouch for this. I quite often get call, and a lot of people on this screen get the same call, that would you take them through the steps? And the question I ask is why, and they're looking for a new experience, and I don't know what's wrong with the experience they had, but there's some questions to take into consideration around this. First, has it been a while since you've taken someone through the steps? Right? Has it been a while since you went through yourself? Have you ever taken all the steps? So if you've never taken somebody through this 12 step, if you've never brought someone through the steps, can you really consider that you've been through the steps? Can you really, because what are the steps really about? We do the steps to fit ourselves to give away the work, right? So have I ever done more than 1/4 step inventory? Do I need to? Have I completed my amends wherever possible, right? These are all kind of questions I take into consideration that wrap around the unmanageability. See, before we get to page 52 in our book, which people consider to be the definition of untreated alcoholism, the unmanageability, on the page before it is a very powerful quote. And it tells me to leave aside the drink question, right? And I ask myself why I'm having a heavy going of life. Why is living so unsatisfactory, right? Leaving aside whatever process or substance you suffer from, completely removed or abstinent, why are you having a heavy going of life, right? Why is life and living so unsatisfactory? And ultimately, for me, when that starts happening, the wind is blowing. The manifestations of my spiritual malady are exposing themselves. And see, the wind outside could be a light breeze, or it could be a tornado or a hurricane, right? And again, the only way I'm going to see that is by looking at what it's doing to everything around it. So how do I know if my internal wind's blowing? How do I know how unmanageable my life is? Well, early in the book, it tells me that, and these are questions to consider completely abstinent or sober. Are you engulfing the lives of everyone you touch, right? Are you creating with the people around you misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, jealousy, right? So all through this book, it gives us indications of stuff. we focus on page 52, and it's important, and I'm going to talk about this stuff because this is the wind blowing. See, the bedevilments are the trees moving. They're the manifestation they're the reflection of my current condition internally. And dependent on how much of this is prevalent in my life is dependent on how close I am when I don't even know it to returning to a condition that I said I would never do again. And if I've never treated it, then I've got a real issue. So there's a couple questions the big book poses on me, right? On page 52, it asks me to ask myself why I shouldn't apply to my human problems the same readiness to change a point of view. Well, what's the point of view that I changed on my non-human problem? Well, maybe at this point, depending on where I am, by the grace of God, I haven't started doing something again. I've been stopped and stayed stopped. And if I was really powerless, then that didn't happen by my own effort, right? I have to see that that's my first conscious contact with God. Although it's not a long-term one, it's the grace that kept me to this point long enough that I've stopped and I haven't started again. How long that's going to last is just dependent on how far down the spiritual scale you've gone. I mean, I can't tell you how long you'll stay in the grace. But for me, it's like a Russian roulette. You know, I want to get through this process as fast as I can, and I want people that are around me to go through it as fast as they can, because if you don't treat what's causing you to start again, you're going to start. So I can ask you to consider this, and I consider it for myself, right? It was easy for me to sit here and tell you that God had something to do with my alcoholism, that I'm not starting again, right? That I'm staying stopped. But the rest of my life, I can run myself, you know? And as you go through, for those of you, that's from someone in early, for the people here that are counting days or have never been through a 12-step process, let's look at it like that. Let's consider it from a different point of view. If you've been around, I don't care whether it's 30 days or 30 years, right? Have you traded the insanity for starting whatever process or substance you came to in this process for the insanity that you can run your life again? You know, what are your current agnostic behaviors look like? Where in your life do you not trust God? You know, is it family? Is it friends? Is it relationships? Is it your job? Where currently today is God not prevalent? You know, God's there. And I said this Tuesday, I absolutely love the fact that you acknowledge God's presence, because, and I used to say this too, so I'm not mocking or knocking anything, but I didn't understand that if God's deep down inside me, I don't have to invite him anywhere. He can sit on the sidelines and watch me run my life to the ground. And then when you know, and the funny thing is, if you truly believe what I believe, is that the script of my life has already been written. So either I can ride it, you know, smooth in acceptance, or I could fight it in resistance. I'm going to lose if I fight. I've seen it over and over again. Look at your life run on self-will and ask yourself, well, how successful has it been? So, this malady, you know, this spiritual condition that a spiritual experience needs to conquer, well, from a first step perspective, I don't have the power to create a life that I can live on a spiritual basis, you know, and I have to look at and I have lack of power, so I need power, and how do I find the power? Book's pretty clear on how to find the power. You know, I'm not going to go too deep into that right now, but I'd find someone awake to the process, guide you through, and they'll connect your plug right into the wall and you'll light up. You know, but trying to find this power on my own, you It's why I look for third choices, because the book's clear also that I'm either going to live on a spiritual basis or die an alcoholic type death. So it doesn't give me, it says there are two alternatives. But see, that's not good for me. I need to find, where I would be so happy today? I would be ultimately the happiest person in the world if I could figure a way to live my life the way I want to on a non-spiritual basis, and you taught me how to play God better. Then I'd be able to control every single thing. I would go right down to this place across the street knowing I'm going to win the lottery, right? I would tell you guys, don't waste your money buying tickets. I already won, right? And everything else in my life, every person I met would love me. Everywhere I went, I'd be the greatest. Everything I would do would be perfect. See, that's what we strive for. That's why we're in fear. We want that, but we can't produce it. And we don't trust God's the person or the thing in my life to create this to happen in the way he wants it, not me. But since that doesn't work, and I proved it over decades, I hit a different lottery today. I hit a lottery called Conscious Contact, and it's probably the biggest lottery I'll ever hit in my life, because I'm in unity with God today. And because of that, I have inner balance, inner peace. Bill says it in the book. It's so cool. On page 8 in his story, he says that he was soon to be catapulted into what he likes to call the fourth dimension of existence. He was going to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that's incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Fred, in his story, said his old life was great, but he wouldn't trade what he had then for the worst he had now. He wouldn't go back even if he could. All this happens through conscious contact, through treating the spiritual malady. So let's look at this. How do I know my wind's blowing internally? Well, the book gives us a few short questions to ask ourselves, but these bedevilments. It asks me, am I having trouble with personal relationships? Well, let's look at that. First of all, here's a consideration. I want you honestly to think right now, if you took a pen and wrote down the 3 most important relationships in your life today, what would they be? Your parents, your spouse, your children, your best friend, right? How many put God on top of that list? Really, how many put God as the most important person or the most important relationship you have in your life? Because trust me, any relationship you put number 1 with God below it, you're going to lose. It's just a fact. Anything I put in front of God, I'm going to lose. So the reason I'm having trouble with personal relationships, you find it in the 3rd column of the 4th step. There's a deep-seated belief on how you're supposed to show up in my life for me to be okay. I've created a role for you, completely selfish and self-centered, that you need to enter into my life, right? I set the ball rolling. I put you in a place that you don't want to be in, and you don't even know it. See, my motives might be good to me, but your life would be so great if mine was better. And that's why I have trouble. I have motives. When you look at your sex inventory and you look at your conduct and motives in your relationships, and you look at a question, how did you enter this relationship? How did it start? Because I needed somebody to fill something that I didn't know God was even could. I had a hole, and I used you as a drug or a piece of food or alcohol, some substance or process. And when it didn't work, you went to the wayside like everything else. And that's why I have trouble. I need something from you for me to be okay. Right? That's resentment 101. You can't fix me, and you didn't do what I need you to do or what I wanted you to do. Why do I have a resentment, right? Because I have an expectation from you for me to be okay. When that's happening, I could tell you your wind's blowing. Okay? Then the rest of the stuff all is a result of this, except for one that we're going to really point out. So I can't control my emotional natures. That's how I react to life, right? That's not my emotions. My emotions are external. The natures are internal. See, I could show up for a work meeting and put on the game face, but deep inside, I don't want to be there. I want to be playing golf. I wanted to be in Florida. I didn't want to be in Santa Ana the other night at 10 o'clock at night, right? So, but I'll show up and I'll pretend I'm good externally. Internally, I don't have the power to change that. It's just like it said, we're to be of real tolerance, right? I could be tolerant to you, but what's real tolerance? Where it comes from the inside, where it comes from healthy relationship with God, where I'm okay no matter how you show up, where my troubles I see are of my making. And I see that when I have a new attitude towards this life, my emotional natures are different. I'm okay. Then it says I'm a prey to misery and depression. Well, that's a result of my emotional natures. We're not talking clinical. We're talking self-centered here. And the prey to being miserable, being depressed, self-doubt, dejection, inadequacy, guilt, I'm a prey to it. I'm sitting duck, right? Because I have all these troubles in my life around the people around me, my emotional natures are just out of control. Of course, I'm going to have anxiety and all these internal feelings, right? Then it says I had a feeling of uselessness. Not that I'm useless, but I feel useless. I skipped one there purposely, and I'll come back to it in a second. I feel useless because I can't get you to do what I need you to do for me to be okay. I try, and let me ask you this question. Even when I get you to do it, do I really feel good? Even so, I've won the battle. I lost the war because all I'm doing is taking you hostage, forcing you to be someone you don't want to be. I'm holding that relationship's not equal. It's not 50-50. I'm stepping on you and forcing you to act a certain way I'm controlling you. It's really what it looks like, and that's, today I try as hard as I can in most of my relationships to the best I can to always be equal, to always be on a level playing field, not to have a scorecard around it. It's not what you did for me or I did for you. It's what we do together. Of course, there's going to be days I do more and days you do more. But when I start holding a scorecard, I separate myself. I become different. There's a top and a bottom. And depending on which side of the scorecard I'm on, it's going to depend on how I feel. And that's really not a good way to go through life. And that's why it says we couldn't make a living. We're talking about a life that I'm okay with, that I can look in the mirror and say, Ian, you know what? Rock on today. Get out there and do what you're supposed to do. Be of service to God and his kids. Show up at work. We talked about the other day, about homes, occupations, and affairs. Where am I at home? This is not financial. This is a life that I'm happy with, right? Then it says, I'm full of fear. Well, the whole reason I'm full of fear is because I don't trust God, right? That's the big indicator right there. If you have fear, it's because you don't trust God, point blank. Fear is a direct relation for me trusting Ian over God. Fear is because the reason I have fear, I'm not talking about I'm afraid of spiders or something. I'm talking about self-centered fears, right? Deep-rooted fears is because there's a parallel with fear and control. As I keep losing control, I get into more fear, right? The more control I lost, the more fear I'm in because I want control, but I'm finite. I can't create the control. So what do I do to create the control? I create more chaos and problems trying to control a situation. See, if I really trust God, it's going to be okay because it's going to be the way it's supposed to be. You know, I'm out of the outcome business. The outcomes, I have a responsibility to show up, but the fear's driven by my inability to trust God. And that's the root of the spiritual sickness when you get down to it. You know, that's the root of the separation of this healthy relationship. The sickness is because I don't trust God. So then it says, we're unhappy. Well, how could you be happy? Think about that. How could you possibly be happy if your relationships are in trouble? Everyone hates you. You hate everybody. You're in resentment. You're miserable and depressed. Your life sucks. You feel useless and you're afraid of it and you're driven by complete fear, or you can't get out of bed in the morning because you're so fear. You're going to be happy? And then it says, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. You know, not the kind of help where I play God, where I'm not even asked and I walk into a conversation, two people are talking and I'm going to tell both of them what they want to know. I'm talking about directed help, right? I'm talking about being basically not playing God, you know, being directed to be of service help, you know, taking someone through the 12 steps, directed help. When someone asks you about something, real help is when I tell them I'm not qualified to give them the answer. Real help is when I tell them I don't have experience, instead of making an opinion on what they should do or start telling people how they should live their life. And when they don't, I get resentful. You know, again, playing God. So it's saying that these bedevilments here, those are basically a small percentage of what my life looks like in an unmanageable state. So you can't see the wind, but you can see the trees blowing. You can't see spiritual sickness, but this stuff will show up in your life and you'll know it and the people around you'll know it. We talked about something last week or Wednesday, like depending on how bad I am spiritually sick or disconnected from a healthy relationship or no conscious contact whatsoever, is going to be to the level of the tornado I'm roaring through the lives of others. And the amount of debris I leave behind is going to be a result of the amount of wind blowing internally, right? And so that's the stuff. That's what's the condition conducive to bring an obsession to allow me to start something I'm stopped, you know? And that malady will ultimately take people to whatever their symptom is, whether it's food, other people, gambling, sex, shopping, anger, drugs, alcohol. Those conditions they were around long before I ever took my first drink. And that's why the book's telling me completely separated from alcohol, leave aside the drink question. Why is living so unsatisfactory? And so what we do is we learn to treat it. We learn to see it as a manifestation of a spiritual sickness. And then I have to see that the only thing that's going to conquer this is a spiritual experience, right? And what's that spiritual experience look like? Well, that's basically a change. See, when I came in here, I was told if I don't change, I won't stay. And then I realized I don't have the power to change. So the first thing I have to do is seek the power. I have to seek the power. And then we have a process called the 12 steps. The first step, identify the problem. The second step's going to show me what I need for the solution. And 3 through 9 are going to get me to a place that I can identify the relationship and see what's in the way from getting this unity with God. And when I realize that that's what my life looks like, I can then maintain. And it's so important. You know, it's so important because I don't fear the spiritual malady. I respect it. Because it's not always these conditions that'll drive somebody to start. You know, look at, if you're been through the book or you know the book fairly well, in More About Alcoholism, there's a few stories to show insanity. The man of 30, Mr. Carpet Slippers, he stopped for a long time. And what they were trying to show there is that he bought the delusion that he was cured, that if he stopped for a long time, he'd be normal again. Okay? Then there was Jim, right? The car salesman, right? And what happened with him is he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. Now, I could go into a debate with people all across the board. He did 1, 2, and 3 and didn't go further. Well, the book's clear. It says that you're a beginner, you're a newcomer until you take the 5th step. And it tells me that the only way I can perfect and enlarge my spiritual life is through work and self-sacrifice with others. So to me, not enlarging my spiritual life means I use this as a self-help program, not a help others program. But whatever it is, he had a resentment and he bought the delusion he could mix whiskey with milk. Then there's a guy, the jaywalker. He's just a whack job all over the place. Like, that guy's just on a self-suicide mission, you know? But the last story is Fred. Think about Fred for a second. He had a charming wife, a promising career, college kids that were going to school. He had all the friends, a house. He had everything. All his externals were fine. He even went to Washington on a business trip, and it came off perfect. He was pleased and his partners were pleased. He wasn't suffering active bedevilments at that time, but he had some spiritual malady. He had some wind blowing. It just may not have been as prevalent as some of us see. And suddenly hit Fred, and he bought the lie. So there was something between Fred and the insanity and suddenly, and I respect whatever that is. So to me, what I see Fred didn't do is he wasn't helping others. Fred was not engaged in a process to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. He had a good life, and he says it. He said it clear that his life was by no means a bad one. But what he saw is that spiritual experience would solve all his problems, right? Fred wasn't useful to other people. Fred wasn't of real help. Fred had no enlargement of his spiritual life, and that to me is one of the most important things I need to do to protect the wind from blowing, you know? And it's so important, you know, so I'm going to ask you a couple considerations. I'm probably going to end a little bit early because I think I've gotten the point I want across, but I'm going to ask you a couple considerations. We're going to open this up for questions, answers. I probably didn't say everything I wanted to say. I probably can't even remember, you know, what I said. So if you ask me to remember, you just said this, I don't. Go back to the recording and listen to it, because I'm just going. Like, the ripcord got pulled and I'm just spewing out my experience right now, right here at this moment. It could be different than yesterday. It might be different tomorrow. But I want you to take into a couple considerations, right? Are you basing the value of your life on your ability to control how you make life happen, right? Do you base the value of your life on your ability and how you can control and make your life happen, right? Do you want to live on a non-spiritual basis and wish it could work? Are you trying to do that? And what are your third alternatives today? What are the things you're doing you wish you weren't doing? And some of them you're afraid to tell even the closest people in your life you're doing. And that's a real important thing. Am I doing anything that I'm embarrassed to tell people around me? It's a hard thing. You know what? That's a really hard thing, right? And so from a step one perspective, do you have the power to change any of that in your life? And from a step two perspective, are you willing to look to a conscious contact with a higher power? Have you admitted that you can't fix this yourself, right? Because once I admit I can't fix this myself, the only thing that's going to work is in connection with a higher power. And am I willing to do what it takes to establish and maintain that relationship? Am I willing to seek? Am I willing to walk? Okay, I'm going to tell you something. I do know this big book, and I'm not saying this cocky. I'm saying it's just because it's a repetition of 164 pages that I go through over and over and over again. So it would be impossible not to know it. But there's a big difference of knowing the black part of the page and starving to death studying the menu. I beg people to be the book. Be these principles in this book. Do what the book says, right? See, this isn't a knowledge-based process. This is a transformational process that will change your life forever. Knowing all the words on the pages will not change your life. It'll make you smarter and good share in the big book, but you won't be living the way we strive to live, happy, joyous, and free. You won't be experiencing, you may not be doing what ultimately put you on a 12-step process, but you may not be really enjoying the benefits and the fruits of life that are right there in front of you. Do you, like your kids, your family, we get to have family, right? We get to, if you have kids, we get to be with our kids. If you have a wife or a husband, you get to be with them. If you have parents, you get to be with them. If you're in a relationship, you get to be there, right? If you have a job, you get to go to work. It's not like I got to go to work today. You get to do that. That's a gift. Think of all the people that are unemployed that wish they had a job. And then I say, I got to go to work today. I get to do that today. I get to show up in life. I get to be of service. And it's all because of this relationship with God. And it all started for me. My journey started when somebody said to me, "Are you living like this?" Because I didn't know it. And I thought just because I wasn't using or drinking, I was a winner, right? I was ahead of the game. It was a good beginning, but I wasn't practicing spiritual principles in all my affairs. I wasn't enjoying the benefits of a 12-step experience. And the greatest benefit of that is giving it away. So with that, I'm going to thank you for letting me share. I'm going to end a little bit early, but anything else I say would just be blabbing out of my mouth. So God bless you and thank you.